Cruise news time. We have a major cruise port impacted by the devastating wildfires in Hawaii. Celebrity Cruise Line is adjusting the itinerary of 2 future cruises. The resurrection of the once defunct Crystal Cruises brand takes another step forward, and passengers on the latest voyage of the Carnival Vista had a rough time getting back to Galveston. Plus, Royal Caribbean just gave the Loyola a heart attack, suggesting a change that I think nobody wants. No, Royal. It's crazy. Cruise news and my views. Let's talk about it. Cruise news. Cruise news. Cruise news. Here's Tony. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Lido, Loca. I am your host, Tony, here with the latest cruise news and views for your face. And you may be saying, well, what the heck is cruise news and views doing back on the Lido Loca YouTube channel? Well, I'll give you an explanation, but I'll save it to the end. Let's get to the meat and taters of today's show. Let's talk about the cruise news. And the first story deals with the devastating wildfires that's going on in Hawaii, specifically on the island of Maui. There's been immense property damage, thousands of people displaced, and there has been loss of life because of this wildfire. There has been significant damage to the Lahaina Harbor dock area. This damage is making that dock inoperable and causing cruise companies to cancel their stop in Maui. Passengers booked on Norwegian Cruise Line's Pride of America have been notified that their stop in Maui has been replaced with a stop in Hilo. But in all honesty, the cruising is really a secondary issue to what's going on in Maui right now. The images coming out of there just devastating. The amount of destruction there, lives lost. Yeah, it's just sad. Cruise news story number 2, Celebrity Cruise Line is notifying passengers booked on the October the 8th and October 17th sailings of the Celebrity Eclipse that their itineraries will be adjusted for Santa Barbara and San Francisco. Originally, the eclipse was supposed to be in Santa Barbara from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., but now they will be leaving 2 hours earlier at 2 p.m., and the eclipse was supposed to get into San Francisco at 11 a.m. on its port of call. Instead, it will be pushed back to 1 p.m. These changes will result in about a 4.5-hour loss of port time for cruise passengers booked on these sailings. And well, why are they doing it? It's whales. That's right, it's whales. Celebrity Cruise Line voluntarily follows the guidelines set forth by NOAA, N-O-A-A, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. This is an organization that tracks the migration of whales, and they put out recommendations for cruising speeds for vessels in the water where the whales shall be. And they have suggested that the Celebrity Eclipse during this time period slow it down. And well, because of the slowing it down, it is going to cause these ships to have less time in port. And well, that certainly is a bummer, but I'm sure you would agree, as cruisers, we got to make the sacrifice to keep the oceans and the animals within it good to go so that we can keep going ourselves. Now, before I get to the next cruise news story, let me talk a little bit about the TSA pre-check. Earlier this year, I got the TSA pre-check, which is $78 for 5 years, and it allows you an easier experience when you're going through security at the airlines. And well, to be honest, it's some of the best $78 I've ever spent in my life, because I have breezed through several security checkpoints, not having to take off my shoes, take off my belt, not needing to take my gear out of my bag. I love it, love it, love it. And I got it just by happenstance. I was in an airport in New York and I saw a little booth there and went and got the pre-check. It was perfect. And the reason that I'm sharing this with you is yesterday, I just by happenstance went into a Staples in South Tampa because I had to use the restroom, to be honest. I'd just driven an hour. I walked in there, and as I was making my way to the restroom, bam! I guess some Staples now have the office for the TSA pre-check, which is kind of cool. That way, if you want to enroll in the program, you don't have to make your way to an airport. You can get it done at Staples. I don't know how extensive this Staples rollout is, but I found it super interesting that you could do that there. Now, I do still need to enroll in Global Entry, which is a way to speed up the process for coming back through customs on international flights. That cost $100, and I looked up the process on that. You actually have to go get interviewed. You have to go to like a government building. There's several places in Florida in the major cities that I can do that. So it seems a little more complex than the TSA pre-check. But yeah, TSA pre-check at Staples. How about that? Cruise news story number 3. We've been talking about Crystal Cruises coming back from bankruptcy. Their parent company a few years ago went bankrupt, and it left Crystal Cruises in the lurch. They got some of their ships seized for non-payment of debt. Eventually, a new travel company purchased the Crystal Cruises brand, and they have been working over the last year to bring those Crystal Cruise ships back into service. They got the very first one back in service, the Crystal Serenity, on July the 31st. And now another cruise ship, the Crystal Symphony, is close to serving paying passengers. They've gone through their refurbishment, and they have just completed their sea trials in advance of going into service for passengers on September the 1st, 2023. Main reason I keep sharing this Crystal story is because as these smaller cruise lines came through the shutdown, it either went one or two ways. The cruise lines went completely out of existence, or they made it. And I'm very excited that we have another cruise line making it. And of course, the other reason I like to talk about Crystal cruise ships is it reminds me of that song Crystal Ship by The Doors. The Crystal Ship is being filled. R.I.P. Jim Morrison. Shout out Lido. Cruise news story number 4. It sounds like there were some challenges on the Carnival Vista yesterday as it was making its way back to Galveston. Shout out to the head of the Lido, Loca, Texas chapter, Slinky, who sent me this information. Apparently, guests were posting on social media that the Carnival Vista had gone adrift with some uncertainty as to whether or not they'd be able to fire up the engines and get back to Galveston. After some period of time, guests on board did receive a letter from Carnival saying that their return to Galveston would be later than anticipated, that any of the cruise transfers that had been purchased, the scheduled time would adjust for when the ship actually got back to Galveston. And then I did do a check on Cruise Mapper, and it does look like the Vista has returned to Galveston. So hopefully all's well that ends well, but I'd love to hear more about that story. There were some pretty wild things being thrown around on social media, which I couldn't really verify. So if you are on the Vista, I would love to hear your experience. Leave a comment below. Now, I gotta tell you what's got the Royal Loyal all up in a tizzy. But before I do that, let me quickly invite you to subscribe. If you like staying up to date with everything going on in cruising, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. That way you don't miss out on any of these episodes. A big thank you in advance. So in case you didn't know, one of the things that cruise lines do to gather data from their passengers that have cruised on their ships, is they send out surveys. They ask them questions. How was their service? Did you like this? Did you like that? And then every once in a while, they'll send out a survey with a question that, you know, is not something that's already in effect, but something that could go into effect. And recently, Royal Caribbean sent out a survey that asked this question. Are you ready for this? Royal wanted to know whether the guests that they were surveying would be willing to pay a small nominal fee to eat the pizza at Sorrentos. You know, the free pizza place on Royal Caribbean. Would you feel comfortable paying a small nominal fee to get what you've always gotten for free? Follow-up question: if there was a charge for the what was always free pizza on Royal Caribbean, would it impact your willingness to cruise on Royal Caribbean going forward? How would I feel about Sorrentos pizza coming with a charge? Well, I wouldn't like that. How about no? How about no? The second question is probably the most important question. The real fear for the leadership at Royal is that they make some change where they now charge for something that used to be free and people stop cruising on Royal. I mean, it's crazy. I'm not gonna not cruise on Royal if the pizza is no longer free, but man, it sure does leave a negative taste in my mouth. And unsurprisingly, people have responded pretty negatively to this. I'm assuming that most people answering the surveys were like, no, I will not pay for the free pizza. And yes, I will quit cruising on Royal. Hopefully that's the way that they answered, to maybe, you know, strike some fear into those maybe considering this change. But Wow, this is going to be wild if this happens. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully this was one of those things where they send it out and see if you can get the freak out in advance so they know whether or not to make the change. But yeah, I'll throw the question over to you. Would you pay a nominal fee for Sorrentos pizza? And if they did make this change, would you quit cruising on Royal? Let's provide some more feedback for the head honchos over there at Royal Caribbean International. Wowza. Okay, now let me answer the question. Why is the new show back on Lido Loca? Well, after doing it for 3 weeks, I found making cruise content for 2 separate channels to be a lot more stressful than making cruise content for 1 channel. Spent a lot of time in my life building out environments where I could operate stress-free, and whenever I start to add stressors to my own self, it just seems ridiculous. I did enjoy the freedom of having that second channel so I could post just the cruise news, just the cruise news show. But yeah, overall, it turned out to be a little stressful after the last couple weeks. And so yeah, we're just gonna bring it all back. Unring the bell and learn from that experiment. So if you love the cruise news, it's right here for your face. And well, if you love the cruise news theme song, don't be sad because it's still here. Here it is. Cruise news, cruise news, cruise news, it's over.